I've been doing delivery work for a long time. Started with packages, moved to food, went back to packages. It's honest work and I'm good at it. I know how to read a neighborhood, how to move fast without looking rushed, how to deal with dogs and motion lights, and customers who buzz you in and then forget they buzzed you in. I thought I'd seen everything this job had to offer. I hadn't. This happened about 3 years ago. I was doing overnight freight runs, the kind where you're moving large shipments to residential addresses, usually businesses operating out of homes, sometimes just people who order in bulk. The hours were late. 2 a.m. was a typical drop time. Most customers knew the schedule and either left instructions or stayed up. The address that night was listed under the name Gerald Marsh. Rural route. The kind of road that has a name on paper but no signs on the actual pavement. My GPS took me to the general area and then gave up. That happens more than people think in rural delivery. You learn to read mailbox numbers and landmarks. I turned onto the road and immediately noticed the tree line. Both sides of the road were thick with old growth, the kind that blocks moonlight completely. My headlights were the only source of anything. No houses visible from the road, just mailboxes set back on posts every quarter mile or so. I found the number I was looking for on a box that was leaning at a 45-degree angle, rusted, with the reflective numbers half peeled off. The driveway beyond it was gravel, long, curving back into the trees so that I lost sight of the road almost immediately after turning in. The house appeared after about 200 yards. It was large, older construction, 2 stories, the kind of place that looked like it had been added onto several times over decades without any consistent plan. Lights were on in 2 windows on the ground floor, warm yellow light, the kind that comes from lamps rather than overhead fixtures. I pulled up, cut the engine, and checked my manifest. 1 pallet. Industrial shelving units. Heavy. I was going to need the lift gate and a dolly. The customer was supposed to be available to sign and direct placement. I knocked on the front door. A man answered almost immediately, like he'd been standing just on the other side waiting. He was in his 60s, average height, wearing a flannel shirt that was buttoned wrong, one side higher than the other. He looked at me without saying anything for a moment, then he said, "You're early." I told him the schedule was 2 to 4 and it was 2:15. He nodded slowly like he was processing this. Then he stepped back from the door and told me to bring everything around to the back. I asked if he wanted to sign first. He shook his head and said we'd do all that at the end. I went back to the truck and started working the lift gate. While I was loading the first section of shelving onto the dolly, I heard a sound from the side of the house, like something moving in the dark near the tree line. I swept my flashlight over and saw nothing. Deer? I thought. There had been a lot of them on the road coming in. I brought the first load around to the back. The back of the house had a large addition that looked newer than the rest. A wide door, almost like a barn door, was already open. Lights on inside. I wheeled the shelving in and looked around the space. It was a large room, mostly empty, concrete floor, high ceiling. Along one wall were existing shelves, floor to ceiling, and on those shelves were containers, clear plastic bins, stacked and labeled. I couldn't read the labels from where I was standing, but they were handwritten, neat, uniform. Gerald Marsh was standing in the center of the room, watching me bring the load in. I asked him where he wanted it set up. He pointed to the far wall and said along there, same configuration as the others. I went back for the second load. On my third trip, I stopped. One of the bins on the existing shelves had fallen and hit the floor. The lid had come off and the contents had spilled partially out. I looked at what had fallen. Papers, photographs. I could see the top few from where I stood. They were all of the same woman, different locations, different times of day based on the light, but clearly taken without her knowledge. She was going about ordinary things, walking to a car, carrying groceries, sitting at an outdoor table somewhere. In each one, she had no idea she was being photographed. There were dozens of photographs in that bin alone. I looked at the other bins on the shelves, all labeled in the same neat handwriting. What I had assumed were inventory labels were names, first and last names, one per bin. There were at least 40 bins on those shelves. Gerald Marsh was standing in the doorway behind me. I don't know how long he'd been there. I hadn't heard him come back in. I set the dolly down carefully. I told him I needed to get the signature paperwork from the truck and I'd be right back. I kept my voice completely even. I turned around and walked past him out the door. I did not run until I was around the corner of the house and out of his line of sight. I got to the truck, got in, locked both doors, and pulled out of that driveway faster than I should have on gravel. I didn't stop until I was back on a paved road with streetlights. I called the police from a gas station 4 miles away, told them the address, the name on the manifest, what I saw. The dispatcher took it seriously and said she was sending someone out. I filed my own report the next morning at the station. What the investigating officers found in that house, I only learned pieces of over the following months, through the kinds of leaks that happen in small communities where people talk. 41 bins, each one corresponding to a different woman. Some of the surveillance went back over a decade, maps with routes marked, schedules written out, notes that indicated extended periods of observation. Gerald Marsh was arrested 4 days after my call. He hadn't hurt anyone, at least not that they could prove. What he had been doing was building something. Toward what end, I don't know that anyone fully determined. But I think about those shelves, 41 bins, 41 names, 41 women who went about their lives, having no idea that somewhere in the woods, in a room, with a concrete floor and a barn door, there was a bin with their name on it. I don't do rural overnight routes anymore. I told my dispatcher it was the drive time, that it wasn't worth it for the hourly rate. That wasn't the real reason. The real reason is that I don't want to turn onto another gravel driveway and find out what's at the end of it. This one is going to sound like I'm making it up. I'm not. I've told it to 3 people in my life, and each one of them asked if I was sure I remembered it right. I'm sure. Some things you remember with a clarity that doesn't fade. This is one of them. I was doing food delivery at the time, app-based, the kind where you pick up from a restaurant and drop off wherever the customer specifies. You get rated, you rate them, and you move on to the next one. Efficient, anonymous, straightforward. I'd been doing it for about 8 months when this happened. The order came in at 9:47 in the evening. Thai food, 2 entrees, 1 soup. Large order for 1 person, but not unusual. The drop address was a mid-rise apartment building on the east side of the city. 12 floors, brick exterior. The kind of building that was probably nice in the 80s and hadn't been updated much since. I'd delivered there before. The lobby had a call box, and most tenants would buzz you in without asking who you were. The order note said Unit 7. Just that. No floor number, no instructions, no name field. filled in beyond the account username, which was a string of letters and numbers that clearly wasn't a real name. I picked up the food, drove over, pulled into the lot. The lobby call box had unit numbers listed with resident names beside them. I found 7 on the list. No name next to it, just a blank line. I pressed the button. Waited. Nothing. Pressed again. A long pause and then a tone, not a voice, just a tone, and the door buzzed open. I went inside. The lobby had a single elevator and a stairwell door. The elevator was old, the kind with a physical floor indicator above the door, the arrow sweeping between numbers. I got in and looked at the buttons. The floors went from 2 to 12. There was no button for floor 1 aside from the lobby, and there was no separate button for any ground floor unit. Unit 7 should have been on the 7th floor. I pressed 7 and rode up. The hallway on 7 was quiet and dim. The overhead lights were the fluorescent kind, and one of them was cycling on and off in a slow, irregular pattern that made the whole hall feel wrong. The unit numbers along the corridor ran from 701 to 712. There was no Unit 7, just 701 through 712. I checked the app again. Unit 7. No floor specified. I took the elevator back down to the lobby, looked at the call box again. Pressed the button for Unit 7 again. Same tone, no voice. I stood in the lobby and thought about it. There was a door beside the elevator that I'd walked past on the way in. It had no number on it. It had no label at all. It was slightly different from the other doors in the lobby, heavier looking, than the kind of door that's there for function rather than access. I knocked on it. Silence. Then from the other side, a voice. "Come in." I tried the handle. Unlocked. I pushed the door open. It was a maintenance corridor. Concrete walls, exposed pipes running along the ceiling. A single work light hanging from a cord about 20 feet in. The corridor ran straight back further than the light reached. On the left side, about 10 feet in, was a door. This one had a number. 7. I stood in the doorway of the maintenance corridor and looked at that door. I want to be clear about what I was feeling at this point. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the sensation of something being deeply off. The kind of feeling you get when you walk into a room and realize every piece of furniture is 1 inch lower than it should be. Nothing you can name but your body knows before your brain does. I walked down the corridor and knocked on the door marked 7. A pause. Then, quietly, "Thank you for coming." The voice was a woman's. Soft. A little hoarse, like someone who hadn't spoken in a while. I told her I had her order and asked if she could open the door. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said, "I can't open it from this side." I stood there for a second processing that. I tried the handle. Locked. But not the kind of lock you turn from the outside with a key. The kind that requires a key from both sides, a deadbolt keyed on the interior. She was locked inside from the outside. I asked her if she was okay. She said she was fine in a voice that communicated clearly that she was not fine. I asked if she wanted me to call someone. She said, "Not the police." "Please, not the police." I asked her why. She said, "He'll know if you call the police. He always knows." I asked who he was. She didn't answer that question. I stood in that maintenance corridor for a moment with a bag of Thai food in my hand and a woman behind a locked door who was afraid of someone knowing she'd been helped. I made a decision. I called the building manager's emergency line, which was posted in the lobby. I told him there was a tenant issue in the maintenance corridor. He asked what kind of issue. I said I thought a tenant was locked in and might need assistance. He went quiet for a moment, then he said he'd be right down. He arrived 7 minutes later. A heavy-set man in his 50s in a sweatshirt, keys on his belt. He looked at me and then looked at the door, and something crossed his face that I noticed but couldn't read. He said he'd take it from here and asked me to wait in the lobby. I went to the lobby and waited for almost 20 minutes. When he came back, he told me there had been a misunderstanding and that the tenant was fine. He handed me back the food bag. Cold now. He told me delivery to this unit wasn't going to be possible going forward and that there had been an error in the system. He walked me to the front door and held it open. I got in my car. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. I thought about what she said. He always knows. I thought about the building manager's face when he saw that door. I thought about the fact that when I knocked on the door marked 7 and asked if she was okay, she didn't say yes. She said, "I'm fine." There's a difference. I reported it anonymously to a domestic violence hotline that night. Gave them the address, the building, everything I could describe. Told them what I heard. I don't know what happened after that. I never found out if anyone went back. I never found out who she was or who he was or what that room actually was. I think about her sometimes when I'm on a route. Whether she's still in that building, whether that door ever got open from the outside. I think about the food getting cold in the bag. The building manager handed back to me she ordered dinner that night because she was hungry, and it was the only thing she could do from inside that room. That's the part that stays with me most. I need to tell you up front that this story has a piece I still don't have an explanation for. I've tried to find one for 4 years. I've gone back to what I know, what I saw, what I can verify, and there is one detail at the end that I cannot make fit into anything rational. I'm going to give it to you straight and let you decide what to do with it. I was doing package delivery for a regional carrier at the time. Not one of the major national ones. A smaller operation that handled overflow in rural areas where the big companies didn't want to go. The pay was decent and I liked driving, liked being alone in the cab for hours. It suited me. Seiler Road was on my route about once every 2 weeks. It was a dead end about 1.5 miles long with 4 residential addresses on it. The last house, at the very end where the pavement gave way to dirt and then tree line, was listed in our system under the name Hargrove. I delivered to the Hargrove address maybe 6 or 7 times before anything unusual happened. Never saw anyone at the house. Always left packages on the porch per the standing instruction on the account. The house was an older ranch style, single story, a little rundown but maintained. Lawn mowed, gutters clear. Someone was living there and taking care of it. I just never saw them. The day everything changed, I had a larger delivery. 2 boxes, fairly heavy, marked fragile. The account instructions said porch delivery approved, but for fragile items, please knock and wait. I knocked, waited. Nothing. Knocked again. Waited longer. I was about to leave the packages with a notice when the door opened. A woman stood there. Late 40s maybe, though it was hard to say with certainty. She was wearing a house coat and her hair was pulled back, and she looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as exhausted in a way that went beyond tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from something ongoing. I told her I had fragile packages and wanted to make sure they got in okay. She looked at the boxes and then looked at me and said, "He ordered those. I said I wasn't sure who placed the order, but these were the address and the name on the label. She said again quietly, "He ordered those." Then she stepped back from the door and said, "Can you bring them inside? He'll want them inside." I carried the boxes in, set them in the front room where she pointed. The house was dim inside, curtains drawn, neat, but very still. The kind of stillness that feels deliberate. I was about to leave when she touched my arm. She said, "Do you come here often?" "The road, I mean. Do you come here regularly?" I told her every couple of weeks. She asked if I had a card or a number. She said she might need to get a message to someone and wasn't sure how. I gave her one of the carrier's general contact cards. It was all I had on me. She held it in both hands and looked at it for a moment. Then she said, "If I'm not here next time you come, if someone else answers or if there's no answer at all, will you remember that I spoke to you today?" I didn't know what to say to that, so I said yes. She nodded, thanked me. I left. I thought about her the entire drive back. The way she said, "If I'm not here," not when, if. 2 weeks later, I was back on Seiler Road. I had a standard package for the Hargrove address. Nothing requiring a knock, so I was just going to do a porch drop. When I pulled up, the house looked different. Not structurally the same house, but the curtains were open, which I had never seen before. And on the porch, there was a man I'd never seen before, sitting in a chair watching the road. He was in his 60s, large, solid, the kind of person who takes up space deliberately. He watched my truck the entire time I came down the road, and he didn't move from the chair. I got out with the package. He said, "I'll take it." He walked down off the porch toward me without being asked, which delivery people will tell you is unusual. Most people wait. He came to me and held his hand out. I gave him the package. He looked at me with an expression that I cannot fully describe except to say it was assessing. The way a person looks at you when they're deciding something about you. He said, "You came by a couple weeks ago." I said, "Yes, standard delivery." He said, "You came inside." Not a question, a statement. Delivered very flat. I told him I brought fragile packages in at the request of the account holder. He nodded slowly, still looking at me. Then he said, "She won't be needing anything brought inside going forward. Porch is fine for everything." I said understood and went back to my truck. He stood in the driveway and watched me the entire time I turned around and drove back up Seiler Road. I could see him in my mirror until the trees closed off the line of sight. I pulled the carrier's contact card on my phone as I drove, called dispatch, and told them I had a concern about a customer address, and asked if there was a protocol for welfare checks, or if I should contact someone else. Dispatch told me to file an internal note, and if I had genuine safety concerns to contact local law enforcement. I filed the note. I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line that evening and reported what I had observed and what the woman had said to me 2 weeks prior. They took my information and said they'd look into it. The following week, I was back on Seiler Road. I had a package for the second house on the road, not the Hargrove address. I dropped it and was turning around when I looked toward the end of the road. A sheriff's cruiser was parked in front of the last house. A deputy was at the door talking to the large man I'd seen on my last visit. I drove past slowly. The deputy made eye contact with me briefly. Nothing communicated. I kept driving. 3 days later, I got a call from the sheriff's department asking me to come in and give a formal statement about what the woman had said to me. I went in that afternoon. The deputy who interviewed me was professional and careful. in what she told me and what she didn't. But I got enough from the conversation to understand the general shape of things. The woman at the Hargrove address had not been seen by neighbors or local contacts in several weeks. The man, her husband of many years, said she had gone to stay with family and wasn't specific about where. There was no evidence of anything that justified an immediate action. The deputy asked me very carefully to describe the woman's exact words. I repeated them as precisely as I could. If I'm not here next time, if someone else answers, or if there's no answer at all. Will you remember that I spoke to you today? The deputy wrote this down and didn't say anything for a moment. Then she asked me one more question. She asked if the woman had said anything about her name, if she had introduced herself at any point. I said no. It had been a brief interaction. She hadn't given me her name. The deputy nodded and looked at her notes. Then she said, "That's interesting." I asked why. She turned the folder slightly so I could see the top page. There was a photograph. Official, the kind pulled from a license or a file. It was the woman from the house. Beneath the photo was a name and a date. The name was Margaret Hargrove. The date beneath it was not a birth date. It was a death date, listed as 8 years prior to the day I was sitting in that office. The deputy watched my face as I read it. She said, "The woman listed on this property's records as Margaret Hargrove died 8 years ago. Her husband retained ownership of the home." I looked at her and I said, "That's not possible." I spoke to her. She touched my arm. She held the card in her hands. The deputy said, "I believe you spoke to someone." I asked who. She said they didn't know yet. They investigated the Hargrove property over the following months. What they found I only know partially. The husband was eventually charged. Not with what you might immediately assume, with financial crimes related to maintaining the identity and accounts of his deceased wife, fraudulently extending her legal existence on paper, in bank accounts, in property records, for nearly a decade. There was no evidence of any other woman ever having been at that property. No identification, no record, no missing persons report that matched what I described. The deputy called me one final time about 6 months after my statement. She said the investigation was moving forward and she wanted to let me know I had done the right thing by reporting it. I asked her one question. I asked if they ever figured out who the woman was. She paused. Then she said, "We're still working on that. She hasn't called back since. I've gone over that afternoon in the house 100 times. The house coat, the card held in both hands, the arm she touched, and the chill I felt when she did, which I had attributed to the temperature in the house. The way she said, 'Will you remember that I spoke to you today? Not will you help me? Not call someone for me? Not do something? Just remember.' Like that was the only thing she needed. Someone to remember. I remember. 3 drivers, 3 routes, 3 doors that should have stayed closed. Gerald Marsh and his 41 bins, each one a name, each one a life being watched from the dark edge of a tree line. The woman behind the door marked 7 who could order dinner, but couldn't turn her own deadbolt from the inside. And Margaret Hargrove, or whoever she was, who held a business card in both hands and asked one driver to remember that she existed. Delivery work is invisible labor. Drivers move through the edges of people's lives every single day, and nobody thinks much about what they see, what they notice, what they carry home with them after the shift ends. Tonight, 3 of them told you. If this one sat heavy on you, drop it in the comments. Tell me which story you can't shake. Subscribe for more files, new ones every week. I'm Mr. Nightmare Files. Lock your door tonight. And if someone knocks after midnight, you don't have to answer. I'll see you in the next one.